1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 13. Therefore, if food is the cause of their falling, I will never eat meat, so that I may not cause one of them to fall. The singer was backstage before the big New Year's Eve show. He could hear the excited crowd outside, and why shouldn't they be excited? 2020 had been such a bastard of a year, and it was on its way out the door. He clenched his fist, thinking about how that damn virus had kept everyone from joining in worship for so long. And now the government is trying to tell them they weren't allowed to worship together, to sing together. Well, he'd show them. God is greater than any government and any virus ever made, and God would bless them for defying the powers of the world who wanted to keep them down. He stepped out on stage, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Hardly a mask among them, even though he had included a warning on the ticket that the people at the concert should obey the local regulations. Well, he had tried. This crowd was more ready to praise Jesus than any crowd he'd ever seen. And who was he to deny them? He stepped up to the microphone, signaled to his drummer. They had kept Jesus waiting long enough. Now it was time to sing. I'm not telling you about any one particular praise concert or church event here. It's more of a composite of all the services and concerts and revivals where Christians made the choice to defy regulations and scientific recommendations to come together for in-person worship. And as infuriating as it can be, I get it. Oh, do I ever get it? My sending parish is the kind where when we exchange the peace, it turns into this big festival of trying to hug as many people as we can before the priest calls us back to order. Zoom is not a great substitute for that. Even the few socially distanced outdoor morning prayer services we had during the summer left me feeling kind of empty. But what else can we do? It's a cliche at this point, it's a saying, but right now we stay apart so that when we do come back together, nobody is missing. Paul wanted the Corinthian Christians to set a good example to people who were new or uncertain in their faith. The thing was, back then, most people only got meat at festivals or fancy dinner parties. The meat was usually offered to the pagan gods as a sacrifice, and after the gods got their fill of the spiritual nature of the meat, the physical leftovers were sold to the butchers. For Christians who didn't believe in the pagan gods, it just meant that the food was left sitting out in front of a statue for a little while before it was sold and eaten. So Paul wants the Corinthians to consider that they know perfectly well there's really no such thing as idol meat. But not everyone knows that. Or maybe they know it in their heads, but they haven't yet accepted in their hearts. And they might still consider eating that meat to be an act of pagan worship. If they see older, wiser Christians eating that meat, they might believe that that Christian also considers it an act of pagan worship, and thus they would be duped into eating with worship towards those pagan gods in their hearts, instead of just eating. Similarly, if someone sees us as Christians attending a big unmasked revival or a non-distanced service, they might be duped into believing that's the correct way to worship. Aside from the risk of infection and spreading the virus, we could also risk rattling someone's faith to the point they'd believe Jesus could only be worshiped in person. For Christians, there is a faith aspect to following COVID protocols. We protect each other physically and spiritually. So for now, we have Zoom, we have online interactions. As frustrating as we are, they'll tide us over. And we can pray that we all reach that promised land where the church services are full of songs and full of hugs. And we'll get there in God's perfect time.